Styx here at the TokenMinorities, bringing you the power rankings for Week 2 of the National Pokeball League. Unfortunately, Michael will not be able to join me today because of the whole school schedule and break thing. So it will be just me again today, but I do have his justification for his rankings, so not all lost. Now, in the past week, we had some excellent games. We had some unexpected upsets. We had even a sweep that really should not have happened, but you know what, it happened anyway, and that's why we love the game of Pokemon. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump right into the rankings. Starting with the bottom 4 teams of the power ranking, you can see that Michael and I have the exact same 4 teams, just in a slightly different order. At number 12, we both have Washington, who is 0-2. They were number 12 last week. There has been no change. And in Week 2, they lost 3-0 to the other lowly ranked Montreal Cobalions. And in the battle, they seem to be somewhat prepared. Like, they seem to have the right thought process, as they had Power Gem Slowking for Charizard and Mandibuzz, for one thing. But ultimately, the Power Gem did laughable damage to Mandibuzz. And in that battle, they would have had a much better shot to win, and in my opinion, they would have won if not for multiple Hurricane misses from Torn-T. I think he missed 3 or 4. One of them, well, a couple of them against, actually, yeah, one against Keldeo, one against the Nidoking, and 2 against Keldeo, as a matter of fact. Had he hit any one of those, he would have won. Had he hit both of those, I'm pretty sure he would have won, just because of what he had left. And he did make some questionable plays late game of switching Mega Scizor into a Keldeo when he did have a Tangrowth that could switch in freely to the Keldeo, and the Tangrowth didn't even do anything later in the battle, so he had no reason to switch Scizor in. He needed Scizor for the Weavile, but ultimately it just came down to the Hurricane misses. Really, the only thing that could keep the team out of the 12 spot next week is if they win. I mean, that is literally the only thing. I mean, the Hurricane misses are unfortunate, but what can you do? At the number 11 spot, I have the New York Metangs. They were previously 11 on my power rankings, so there is no change again. And they had a respectable score against the number 2 ranked Toronto Staraptors, but in my opinion, he wasted his final Gambit Victini first turn against Jirachi for the Staraptors, when a V-Create from that same Victini would have done tons of damage to anything on the Staraptors team. So, I mean, it really was a waste of a Victini, and ultimately just got rid of a huge threat for the Staraptors turn 1. And I know Jolt, he would take that trade any day of the week, because the rest of his team just had a great matchup against the Metangs. So in the battle, he seemed to be a little bit over-prepared for Clef, which unfortunately left him weak to the rest of the Staraptors sweepers, and he still kind of got smacked by a Cosmic Power Calm Mind Clef. So despite the apparent over-preparation, he still kind of just got smacked by it. And although they have faced the toughest schedule to this point, I believe they have faced the number 1 and number 2 teams in the power ranking, 2-0 or 0-2 is still 0-2, and a -7 differential does not necessarily lend itself to beneficial rankings. So that's why I have the Metangs at 11. Michael has the Swamperts at 11, just because 0-2, they have not been playing well. They've been tilting pretty hard. So that's his justification for having the Swamperts at 11. I have the Swamperts at 10 just because I would take them over the Metangs at any point, just because I like their team matchup that much better. And they were previously 7 in my power rankings, so they are down 3 spots this week. And really, the Swamperts are just a huge disappointment up to this point. I really like the team at the start, as you can see by, I think I gave them like a number 3 or 4 ranking overall, but they have gone through the first 2 weeks with an 0-2 record and a -5 differential. In the battle, they played well. They used a Trick, Rest, T-Wave, Psyshock, Gothitelle very well to take out the threat in Starmie. and was ultimately able to get his scarf back while being at a decent amount of health. But a misclick of switching into Dragonite into a Draco Meteor from a Hydreigon was huge. I mean, like, it destroyed Dragonite's multiscale. It made it take almost 60% damage, and that really just he couldn't bounce back from that. Additionally, his Rotom H was his only real forms of dealing with Mega Pinsir and Sylveon, and it just so happens that his opponent brought both, so he just got worn down really, really quickly to the point where Mega Pinsir was able to pretty much clean up the game. And Sylveon was, I mean, Rotom was pressured early game by Sylveon and late game by Pinsir, especially once Blastoise went down and Rocks went up. The Rotom really just lost all its ability to check anything of his opponents, and that was what ultimately led to the Swamperts losing, and unfortunately losing 2-0 and just getting knocked down to number 10 in my power rankings. Michael has the New York Metangs at number 10 for similar reasons to me. He just thinks that the Swampert's 0-2 start is a little bit worse than the Metangs, so that's why he has them ranked lower. Now, we both have the Montreal Cobalions at number 9. They were previously number 10 in my power rankings, so they are up 1, and although they lost 5-0 in Week 1, and that can never really look particularly good, given St. Louis's meteoric rise, that Week 1 loss, while still bad because, I mean, 5-0 is 5-0, I mean, ouch. I mean, it's not as bad because St. Louis has done so incredibly well. In the battle, they were able to make up some of their differential against the Washington Charizards. I mean, Washington's still the bottom, but, I mean, a team ranked above, they won. So they did what they were supposed to do. They took care of business, had a decent differential. So now, even after starting out with a -5 differential, they're only at -2 after this week, which is huge. And he played Spadef Mandibuzz very well, being able to knock off a Guru's Assault Vest, intoxicating a Slowking, and he showed excellent preparation for his opponent's team by bringing an Ice Punch Nidoking to handle a potential Assault Vest Torrentee. So that shows some foresight and some planning, which I really like, which is why I decided to move them up this week, despite the fact that, in my opinion, they only won because of low accuracy moves, namely Hurricane. This part of the ranking is where Michael and I begin to differ just a little bit. As you can see, we have 3 of the same teams, but we have 2 vastly different things. Both of the teams that we differ with, we have in our top 4. So, I mean, that's why you have 2 analysts. I mean, it gives you some variety in your rankings, and it spices things up a little bit. But anyway, in the number 8 spot, I have Manaphy City. They were previously number 9 in my power rankings, so they're up 1 this week. And after a Week 1 loss to Colorado, they bounced back against a very potent San Antonio squad. I mean, even though San Antonio hasn't been playing well, looking at their team, I mean, that is a scary team no matter how the coach is playing. So in order to be able to beat that team and beat it convincingly, you have to prepare very well. In the match, the preparation showed. They had a Colbur Starmie that was able to counter a Conkeldurr and scare it out. And even though it got trapped, it still did what it needed to do. And basically, the Manaphy City coach identified his win con early. He identified that he needed to take the Rotom out in order for Pinsir and Sylveon to be able to put in work and for Pinsir to ultimately be able to sweep, and he took all the necessary steps to do it. He took out the Blastoise with Sylveon, which got rid of the spinner, and as soon as the spinner was gone, he didn't immediately try to get up rocks and sacrifice his positioning. He strategically placed himself to where he would have the optimal positioning to get up rocks, which would cripple the Rotom, and once it was pressured more by the Sylveon and Rocks and Mega Pinsir, he was just able to win the game by killing Rotom off with a close combat after it was at about 30% from Mega Pinsir and win the game. So that battle really showed some good planning and really good win con identification and execution. At number 8 for Michael, he has the Oakland Rosarators, who I have at number 7. He basically said that they suffered a bad loss in Week 2 and they need to rebound. My justification is basically the same. I had them previously at number 6, so they are down one spot this week. They lost 2-0 to Phoenix, which, I mean, Phoenix is high ranking in my power rankings, so it's not that huge of a loss, but I mean, a loss is still a loss. And the week 1 win over San Antonio that they had looked incredibly impressive at the time, but as San Antonio has been tilting, it's looking less and less impressive, to be honest. And in the battle, they played very questionably. They lost their Roserade early. They had nothing for a Life Orb Gengar at all. I mean, to be fair, there's really nothing for a Life Orb Gengar except for something that's pink and not named Clefable. But, I mean, they still had really nothing for it. I mean, the Mamoswine was 2-hit KO'd after he let it take damage. And he got unlucky early while getting Parahaxed with his Lopunny against a Thundurus when it stayed in to Thunder Wave it, and they tried to go for a Frustration to get damage off. But they did have a Florges as a emergency backup with Aromatherapy to get that paralysis off. Still was unfortunate though, because the damage would have been fantastic to where Quick Tech might have been able to clean it up. I didn't know the Thundurus' spread, so I can't say for sure. But ultimately, the Roserators got walled by a defensive Diancie once Roserade and Mamo were gone, and that was pretty much the game. So they played very, very poorly with their two things that would have been able to take out the Diancie and let them get KO'd early. So that is why they lost, and that is why they have moved down in my power ranking. At number 7, Michael has the Colorado Avalugs, and unfortunately they had some bad luck in the game. I'm not going to suffer too much, but I mean, it's pretty much similar reasoning to why I have the Colorado Avalugs at number 6. They were previously number 4, so they're down 2 this week. They lost convincingly to a lower-ranked St. Louis, but the team looks solid despite running into a really what has been an incredibly surprising St. Louis squad. I mean, St. Louis has just impressed incredibly, and Colorado just kind of ran into a buzzsaw at this point. And he seemed not to have the best matchup from Team Preview when it came to the Pokemon that were brought, and he was caught off guard, obviously, by St. Louis' squad, which was even obvious in the replay. But he did still have some solid preparations in place. He brought a Psyshock Mew for the Amoonguss. He made a great play of double T-waving to catch an incoming Gara, as well as he brought the correct screen on his Klefki for his opponent's team, which was reflect in this case because of the myriad of physical attackers. So he still showed well, but ultimately he was just kind of out-prepared and outplayed in this match, which led to him losing and dropping a couple spots in the ranking. Now, this is also a spot where Michael and I differ. He has the Phoenix Sunkern ranked at number 6, and this stems from our difference in ranking in the beginning of the season and preseason. I had the Sunkern ranked number 1, Michael had them ranked much lower, so even despite them winning this week, they are still low. And basically, he just said that Phoenix had a good rebound win this week, so that is why he ranked them at number 6. They had moved up a couple spots in his ranking. At the number 5 slot, we both have the Atlanta Braviary. They were number 5 in my ranking last week, so there is no change, and they lost to the number 1 team, Portland, in a really, really, really close match. They had to face 2 top teams in the first 2 weeks and provided excellent games in both cases, winning one and narrowly losing the other. Now, in the match, they had kind of a questionable play early on of seismic tossing a Scizor when they could have soft-boiled it to allow their Blissey to be at better health, but ultimately he outplayed Portland the entire match, but just kind of lost to Cresselia when it came down to a game of crits, which he was not lucky enough to be able to win. And that really evidenced the fact that he did not prepare his team for a Calm Mind Cresselia, which, I mean, is completely understandable given Portland's team. I mean, they have threats on threats on threats, but still not preparing for something that ultimately cost you the game is why Atlanta lost. I mean, it did come down to luck, but had they had like a Haze user or even Toxic on just something random would have won the game for them. But ultimately, they did lose, even though it was a very, very close game against a top team, which is why they have not changed at all in the rankings, and they are still number 5. And Michael just completely agrees with me on this. And I mean, he says it's a minor loss. I mean, there's nothing there's nothing really devastating about this. They are still a very powerful and potent team with a solid coach. And so while it could be frustrating, I really hope that they don't begin tilting because of this week 2 loss. And now we are up to the big boys. At the number 4 slot, I have the St. Louis Reshrams, and at the number 4 slot, Michael has the Manaphy City. Well, not the Manaphy City, just Manaphy City. But he has Manaphy City at number 4 because he really liked their rebound win, and he is actually predicting them to beat the Atlanta Braviaries next week. So there's a little bit of prediction in his justification for this ranking. I just kind of went with what I had seen up to this point. And the St. Louis Reshiram were previously number 8 in my power ranking, so they are up 4. I mean, they have moved. I mean, they've straight up just packed their bags and just taken off. They 3-0'd a 4th-ranked Colorado squad, and through the first 2 weeks, they have a +8 differential, which is absolutely ridiculous. In their battle, they had incredible planning. I mean, it was absurd. Like, it was sets that I was not expecting at all and would not have thought of that ended up really, really doing well. Take, for instance, a Wish Bulky Salamence, which really, really caught Colorado off guard, and Toxic crippled the Mew, which would have ultimately been a problem. He showed that the Sand and Stoutland combo could be used effectively, and I mean, Choice Banded Stoutland with return in the Sand is just potent. I mean, that's all there is to it. And he brought a Clear Smog for Altaria. Clear Smog on a Moongus, for Altaria, which really just crippled his opponent, prevented him from being able to set up much at all. And he had a he had a sexy HP Ice prediction on a Lando T, which allowed Infernape to kill it with a Mach Punch next turn. I mean, that just came out of left field. I mean, it was beautiful. I saw that and I had to pause it just to bask in how amazing of a play that was. I mean, that was almost like a Da Vinci painting. You just kind of sit there and you bask in its glory for a couple minutes. I mean, that was a beautiful play, took out a huge threat to his team, and even after that play, he had a special Tyranitar to take on Mew and Landorus T. I mean, Tyranitar with that like 134 base attack, and he decided to use special, and you know what? It really, really hurt. It really, really hurt Colorado's team because he was able to Dark Pulse the Mew after the Mew wisped it and thought it was in the clear. Nope, Mew just went ahead and died to a Dark Pulse from a Tyranitar. So it was a very impressive win, very impressive preparation, which is reflected by the significant jump. The coach is clearly comfortable with his team, and despite my initial doubts, he has used that team to near perfection, and it's obviously a case of somebody who knows what pokes he is comfortable with and knows them inside and out. At the number 3 slot, I have the Phoenix Sunkern. Michael has the Reshiram at number 3 for similar reasons to why I had the Reshiram at 4. But Phoenix, they were previously number 3 in my ranking, so there's no change. And they won solidly against a good Oakland team. They won 2-0. And the game had some hacks, but it was clear that he carefully made his team to handle his opponent's threats. He used Diancie excellently to counter Mega Lopunny. Granted, had Mega Lopunny used Power Up Punch and High Jump Kick, I don't know if Diancie would have had Protect, but it might have, which would have even been better preparation. Manaphy was still able to put in work, and Thundurus was used as an excellent emergency check to Mega Lopunny. And while he used it recklessly early on by just going for an immediate T-Wave, he was rewarded with an immediate Parahax. And really a play that just kind of had me scratching my head was he switched his Medicham into a Florges Moonblast, which, I mean, obviously just had it get blown back. But ultimately, Diancie was able to come through and win, and despite it being a very, very ugly win that I was not impressive in the least, and would be the type of win that would actually result in somebody moving down in the rankings if somebody immediately below them, had a very impressive win. Teams 4 through 7 in my Week 1 ranking lost, so although it was ugly, the Phoenix Sunkern were able to retain the number 3 spot on my power ranking. And now the top 2, the really big boys. I mean, it's same 2 teams for both of us, just a different order based on what we had in our preseason power rankings. At number 2, I have the Toronto Star Raptors, who, again, were previously number 2, so no change. They won convincingly against a bottom team, but they haven't been really tested yet. They've just faced two bottom teams. So despite having a better differential than Portland, I can't quite justify them jumping over Portland for now. And looking at the match, the score was closer than the game actually was. It was never really in doubt. And Jolt was really proud of his switching a Lucario into a Toxicroak, but that play was mediocre at best. I mean, it was obvious that Toxicroak was going to go for a gunk shot, so I mean, no, that's not something to be proud of. Although I will give him props, Special Lucario did some solid damage, and very solid team building was allowed him to punch holes with multiple setup sweepers, and he had 5 different win cons. Clef did major damage because of perfect setup for the battle, which is why I have Toronto Star Raptors at number 2, and Michael has them at number 1. At number 1, we have the Portland Timbers, who were previously number 1 in my ranking, so there's no change, and they have done what a top team should do. They have gone 2-0 so far, and in Week 2 they were tested against another top team and won in the game of the week. And looking at the match, although he didn't run Rough Skin Garchomp, it was weird. I don't know why he would run Sandvale. He wasn't even running Sand on his team, so that was just kind of something that stuck out to me and was maybe just an oversight in team building. Really, he had nothing at all for Trev's team except for the frickin' Calm Mind Cress, which turned around a 4-1 deficit and gave him the win. It was a game of crits that Portland was ultimately able to win. So, I mean, that's a win against another top team, which, while it was very ugly and just kind of meh, I mean, that's a win. I mean, winning teams find a way, and that's what Portland did, and they won against another top team. So they're now 2-0, and it has there's no change in the rankings because both teams have won. Portland has won against a top team. Toronto has won convincingly against 2 bottom teams. So yeah, that is why Portland is ranked number 1 and Toronto Star Raptors are ranked number 2. So yeah, guys, that is the ranking. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. And this is Styx signing out. Why not? See you guys.